Hello to all of you.
I never thought I would feel as good at home as I do now, as I feel right now. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone present and the organizers who made this evening possible. It is a great honor for me to be here and to receive the Titan Economic Reform Award today. For those of you who don't know me, I am an economist who had the honor of guiding the fate of my country. All my life, I have been a lover of economic theory and facts. Theory and my own story led me to the ideas of the Austrian School of Economics, and especially to the ideas of freedom. As such, I am committed to the ideas of freedom, that is, to the unwavering defense of the right to life, liberty, and property. And this is the result of the fact that I spent most of my adult life in a country engulfed by socialism. Being honored in this way fills me with pride. I have already said that socialism is a disease of the soul, that it attacks and corrodes a person at their fundamental values, and if it is not confronted in time, it can lead to disaster, as it happened in my country. However, the silent majority is waking up, the silent majority is waking up, and as a result, the course of history changes. Today, I have the honor of being called a titan of economic reforms, and I must say that this title is truly fitting, because the task we have been tackling in Argentina over the past year is truly titanic. Not just due to the scale, depth, and complexity of our reforms, but also because we have to fight against extortion and sabotage from corporate interests entrenched in power, entrenched in the power of the old regime. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you some ideas about what we are doing, which some are already calling the Argentine miracle, but also some misconceptions of traditional politics. Because the battle ahead will be long, and we need the right intellectual tools to win it. First of all, we are fighting against the ideas of gradualism. Our battle is against the ideas of gradualism. Argentinians are used to disappointments. This is what happens after a century in a country affected by socialism. There have been dictatorships and democratic governments here, but what remained unchanged was collectivism in one form or another. There were also reformist experiments, but so far all of them have been unsuccessful. None of them managed to make the transition from impoverished collectivism to capitalism, which redeems the plight of the poor. This decades-long cycle of illusions and failures led many Argentinians to decide to emigrate if they had the opportunity, or to settle for mere survival if they did not. This was repeated throughout almost the entire 20th century, along with the subsequent destruction of wealth and capital that it brought about. It defines what we've termed Argentina's unification century. Argentina's government coalitions elected for reforms quickly failed, and the vicious cycle began again. For decades, many have wondered why reformist coalitions failed. Why in Argentina's history reformist coalitions failed? The reason is simple. Until now, no government, except for the government of Carlos Saul Menem, if you will, dared to fully and fearlessly apply the principles of liberalism. This occurs due to fears of losing support, breaking agreements, facing social protest, or losing upcoming elections. This happens because politicians, regardless of their party, primarily strive to stay in power at any cost. They consider the promised changes only afterward. Just like a businessman strives to maximize his company's profits, a politician has a main driving force: maximizing the time they stay in power and the size of the budget they control. It is precisely because of the fear of losing support that they adapt their ideas to maintain it in a way that gives them confidence, mistakenly believing that they will stay in power longer. Thus, under any pretext, even those who want to make changes or reforms choose gradual reforms which inevitably end in failure. This paradox is very interesting. It can be called the paradox of the reformist politician who is convinced that the most important thing for changing the country is to stay in power. They themselves bring about their own failure. Well, we are reformers, but we are not politicians. We don't believe that the most important thing is to stay in power. For us, the most important thing is to carry out our reforms. We govern without fear, applying shock measures to build trust in society and the market, not only because these are our beliefs, but also because empirical data supports us. Starting from year 60, all shock programs except for the 2019 program were expansive in terms of activity and employment, while all gradualist programs ended in failure. Secondly, we did not reach a consensus with the opponent. Another misconception among reformist politicians is the consensus fallacy. Most reformers face a political class that tells them they must coordinate their reforms with it. However, if the politicians one encounters represent an ideology opposite to one's own, which is the cause of all evils, then there is and can be no possibility of reaching an agreement. There can be no agreement between good and evil because we work for antagonistic interests. The terms of reform cannot be agreed upon with those who live by preserving their privileges. On the other hand, thirdly, we must deal with both the urgent and the important at the same time. We took office in an absolutely critical context, understanding that the most urgent thing is to stabilize the economy, but the main thing is to dismantle the collectivist leviathan that has been created in Argentina over the past 100 years. That is why our second economic measure was not related to what was urgent, but to what was important. The decree from '73 marked the beginning of a set of structural reforms that will undoubtedly open our markets and bring us closer to the rest of the world. And this is already happening. Shortly after that decree, we sent a draft of the main law to Congress, which, taken as a whole, represents a state reform 8 times greater than the one carried out by the government of Carlos Saúl Menem. In other words, we have carried out the largest structural reform in the entire history of Argentina, reversing 123 years of decline. In other words, we not only dealt with the urgent matters of stabilizing the economy, but also implemented the most ambitious reform project in the history of our country. We did all this at the same time because urgency is no excuse for postponing what is important. The fourth point, and above all a very important one on a global level, is reducing the size of the government. The idea I want to leave you with is that reforming the state means returning the power that was taken from the citizens, and the only way to do this is to reduce the size of the government. There is no other way. I say this in response to those who advocate for a large but efficient government. I know this may sound nice or well-intentioned, but believe me, when a politician tells you they need an efficient government, they're actually advocating for better mechanisms to steal wealth from the citizens. The only acceptable government is the smallest possible, to return to taxpayers what is rightfully theirs. Eliminating government bureaucracy is the best way to stop the selling of services, as it removes opportunities to offer them. People's lives cannot depend on the decision of a bureaucrat behind a counter. Deregulation, the only successful way, is the way of the chainsaw. Because a government that takes on tasks outside its competence ultimately fails to fulfill its main responsibilities. As Murray Newton Rothbard, the inventor of anarcho-capitalism, said, the larger the size of the state, the fewer resources will be used to satisfy the desires of consumers who contributed to production, and the more resources will be used to satisfy the desires of consumers who do not produce. That is, parasites, friends, politicians. And finally, even despite all the changes we've made during this first year in power, which moreover was almost unanimously called an absolute success. In the first year, we had the biggest budget surplus in 123 years. We reduced wholesale inflation from 54 to 0.8, and we lowered the poverty rate from 55 to 38. In just 1 year, we already have a higher level of activity and growth than when we came to power, and we've only been in government for 1 year, Moreover, Decree 73 and the Basic Law were just the tip of the iceberg. We still have to carry out 3,200 structural reforms. Our goal is challenging yet simple: to make Argentina the freest country in the world. Because we know that freedom brings prosperity. Because we know that our ideas work, because we have proven it throughout this entire year. This was just the beginning. The best is yet to come. I also appreciate this recognition. May God bless each of you and the Argentinians. May we make Argentina and the United States of America great again, and may the heavenly power be with us. Long live triumph. Thank you very much.